DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And welcome back. We already are back on Paramount. Just a week later, we are back on Paramount for some more appetizers for you. Some appetizers, and I'm talking about UFC 325. So just weeks, back-to-back weeks, we have numbered UFC cards. My real question though, with like the numbered UFC cards, do they matter quite as much now that they're not pay-per-view, or will there ever be contending like fight nights that maybe have like an interim belt or several title contender eliminator matches on them? But still, regardless, we're going with what we see here. And so last week was UFC 324, and this is UFC 325. And this is UFC 325 Volkanovski versus Lopes 2. And that's Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopes 2. And this is February 1st, 2026. So the first Saturday of February coming up, and that's at the Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney, Australia. And kind of a question that I kind of have to ask that I'm a little confused with when it comes to like the start time of this card. So we know that with the new Paramount, the movement to transition to Paramount, they moved like pay-per-view, like number card, the start times to them. They moved it back an hour to where it's, instead of, for people like me that live in Central Time Zone, it's not 9 o'clock. It doesn't start at 9 anymore, which is great, So it starts at 8. So everything with that seemed kind of normal with the build up to UFC 324. But I understand that this card is over in Australia, but the start time is the same. So the start time is still, early prelim starts at 4 p.m. and then the main card starts at 8 p.m. So, okay, yeah, I understand that. Everything looks normal and fine. But why did they, my question, if anyone out there can answer it to me, because I kind of looked it up, like, why did they do like the morning weigh-in show? Like, so I guess it'd be like 12 hours in advance. So the people fighting on this card have like a day and a half to rehydrate and all that. So I don't know, because that's something I usually do, is watch the pre-fight weigh-in shows that's on in the morning. But I didn't even waste my time rewatching it because there was no Sanko and no DC on it, so I just passed on rewatching that. But I thought that was odd that it came on like last night at like midnight, or like midnight, one in the morning is when it aired, and it usually airs at around like 11 a.m. In the morning usually here. But for some reason it was super early, even though the fights are pretty much the same as any of the Paramount numbered cards so far. But yeah, so I just didn't go back and watch that. But yeah, that had me a little, I don't know if it had me concerned or a little excited at first, because then I was like, oh, maybe the main card starts at like 4 p.m. or 5 or something, so I could just get right on to watching the main card after watching the Royal Rumble. But doesn't look like that's the case. But anyways, so that's just kind of my mashup, my questions that I didn't have answers to coming on here. But let's get into this card a little bit. Let's get into the prelims, and then we'll get on to the main card here. But anyways, so can I get a menu? And the first thing I wanted to go over was kind of the preliminaries. I think it's pretty safe to say that the preliminaries aren't quite as good. The early and the standard prelims aren't quite as good as they were last week for UFC 324. And I mean, the big reason for that is they got the road to UFC season 4 finale fights on here. So that literally takes up like almost the entire early prelims. And then when it comes to notable names, you only have like Cody Brundage versus Cameron Roston. That's like the co-main event of the standard prelims, a middleweight bout, and then you have light heavyweight Junior Tafa versus Billy Alcana, and that's the main event for the standard prelims. But after that, it's not a lot of notable names. But can't say that these future stars, road to the UFC type of fighters, I can't say that there's not a future star in there. But I also can't say I haven't watched a whole lot of like the UFC uh, reality TV. I haven't watched that since like the early days, like the first 10 seasons or so of The Ultimate Fighter. But since then, I've never really watched like any of the new Ultimate Fighter seasons or these Road to the UFC or any of those Dana White's Contender Series or any of that. I haven't watched any of that in a while. And the reason that probably really started is they moved it. They moved like the Ultimate Fighter. They moved it off of like standard television there for its like biggest run. It was what on Spike TV, and then it just went to like I don't know streaming services or like ESPN Plus, and just lost track of watching that. But yeah, so that's kind of what maybe hurts the early prelims. But then there's not a lot of notable names on just the standard prelims because uh, last week, yeah, last Saturday's prelims with the quality of fights and the stoppages and the finishes that you got on the prelims. I mean, it was good enough, and the name recognition on that card, it was good enough to be a fight night. This not so much, unless you're going to title it as the road to the UFC season 4 finales. But besides that, not really. But you got the stoppages, and you could have definitely easily argued um, that the prelims for UFC 324 were better than the main card pretty easily, just with the amount of stoppages. So that's the prelims and early prelims. The last thing I want to go over before I get into the main card here was we had I mentioned DC just a second ago, Daniel Cormier just a second ago on the morning shows, how he's on the morning shows and stuff. But we had a DC moment during the weigh-ins that I guess I missed it live. But everyone knows the towel trick. The towel trick. Place your hand on top of the towel while you're getting weighed with your drawers down, and that helps you make weight. And that's what Daniel Cormier did several years ago. I think it was in a fight. It was either in a fight leading up to fighting John Jones, or it was either yeah, it must have been John Jones because he didn't have to cut weight to fight Stipe Miocic. So yeah, it must have been one of those John Jones fights where he was overweight, a little overweight at 205. Must have been 206, 207. You got to be exact weight or a little under to be able to actually fight for the title. But we had one of those moments in the weigh-in show. So Aaron Tau, who I think is some Polynesian or Hawaiian or or he got a weird tattoo on his face. That's why I go to that and the name Tau, Aaron Tau, or he's Australian. But anyways, he weighed in and originally weighed in. They bring in the box to put around him, but when he was the privacy box, he kind of had his elbows kind of up like this. And he had his elbows like leaning on the edges of it. And so when he first weighed in, he weighed in at 122 and a half pounds, which obviously that seems seriously underweight. So of course they did some type of weight where they just put like, I don't know, took the privacy box away and like weighed him in privacy, and then he ended up weighing in again, and he weighed 129 pounds and was overweight, and they just canceled the fight. But yeah, that was an interesting moment at the weigh-ins, similar to last week, a little different, but still dramatic an interesting moment at the weigh-ins that we had 2 weeks in a row at Paramount. You had the guy literally passing out, fainting, and falling face first on his face, flat on his face, and then you got a guy trying to pull the old DC towel trick, but he was trying to elbow the privacy box. All right, so that's enough of the way talking about the weigh-ins and the prelims. Let's get into the main card now. So this is UFC 325, Volkanovski versus Lopes 2. And the curtain jerker, the first fight on this card is a lightweight bout between Killen Selkilled versus James Malarkey. And Quinlan Skalkill, he seems like he's kind of a up and coming fighter, and this fight seems like it's kind of set up for him to get a finish on Paramount, probably a knockout or a submission on Paramount. And he's had a couple since he's gotten to the UFC. He's had two knockouts, but he's on a 10-fight winning streak, and is if you consider Dana White's Contender Series the UFC, then he's had four fights in the UFC. He's 4-0 in the UFC, and obviously he's 5-0 in his last five fights. But in those the fights that he and just in his most recent fight, Nasrat Hasgrat KO head kicked him, and then three fights back from that, Abdul Jabil, he knocked him out TKO punches in 19 seconds of the first round, and then that one against Nasrat Hasgrat was just at 2:30 of the first round. But yeah, this fight seems like it's kind of set up to be a devastating finish here over Jamie Malarkey, who's not quite as hot of a prospect and isn't on a 10-fight winning streak either. In his last five fights, he is 3-2 in his last five fights. And in the three losses he's had, he's been TKO'd in all three of them. So Mauricio Rufy, who fights on this card, TKO punched him. Nasrat Hasgrat TKO punched him, who we just mentioned, that Quinlan Skillkill, he just KO head kicked him in his last fight. And then the fifth fight back, Muhammad Namov, got TKO punches by him as well. So, like I said, this seems like this is kind of set up for a nice curtain jerker to get us a devastating knockout or just a finish on Paramount, which is what was kind of lacking last week in their debut on the UFC debuting on there. Really, the greatest moment they got for the main card was just the fight of the night. What was definitely they got their money's worth for that, but they didn't get the crazy finishes and stuff that they were wanting. But I think that this fight is specifically kind of set up for that. And before I get too far ahead and go over the fight, the past fight history of these two fighters. So Quinlan Selkilled has 11 fights in his career with 10 wins and one loss. In the 10 wins, he has 4 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and 3 wins by decision. And then the one loss, he got submitted, and that was, like I said, that was quite a while back. That was back in 2021. Got rear naked choked by Pablo. So it's been a while since he's been finished. It's been a while since he's lost in general, and he he fought for Eternal for quite a long time. So has experience fighting in Australia. And then Jamie Malarkey, and he has had 26 fights in his career with 18 wins and 8 losses. In the 18 wins, he's had 10 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and 5 wins by decision. And then in the 8 losses, he's been knocked out 6 times, and he's been knocked out 3 times in his last 5 fights. So, like I said, this feels like this is building up for Quinlan Skillkill knockout. And also, like I was talking about how we feel like it's built up to be a finish, a stoppage. It doesn't look like it's really any other way than for Jamie Malarkey to get knocked out because he's never been submitted. On top of having a bit of a suspect chin, he has a really good submission defense. So it's kind of where I'm starting to lean towards for this fight is for him to get knocked out, and then he's lost two by decision. So let's see here. So in the first fight, the lightweight bout on UFC 325 card, Quinlan Skillkill versus Jamie Malarkey. I'm going with Quinlan Skillkill to kind of boost his popularity and kind of make people know who he is, and people watchers on Paramount get tuned in, get what they're tuned in for. And I'm getting a knockout here. So Quinlan is going to knock Jamie Malarkey out, and he's done it. He did it. The last two knockouts that he had came like pretty early in the first round, but I don't know if he's gonna get that quite of a quick knockout. But yeah, I think in the second, third round, I'm looking for Quinlan Skillkill to knock Jamie Malarkey out. All right, now then, on to the heavyweights, which if you've been tuning in, if you're a follower, a watcher here, you know I love the heavyweights. I love the beef. I love the hog mollies. Like I gotta have it. I love the opportunity, just the potential. You get that kind of aura, that feeling going into the fights with heavyweights. Just that there's a potential for someone to get hurt really bad. So you want to see someone get their head knocked off. And this matchup, I think, has good potential for that. You have a heavyweight bout between Taya Tuivasa versus Talison Teixeira. And Taya Tuivasa, it's a little hard for me to believe he's still in the UFC, but UFC they've obviously scheduled this fight for a reason because they want to see Taya Tuivasa either knock someone out or obviously he's probably going to get knocked out because Taya Tuivasa is 0-5 in his last five fights, and he's been stopped in four of the five. He got knocked out, KO punches by Cyril Gahn, Sergey Pavlovich, KO punches, Alexander Volkov, Ezekiel choke submission, Marcin Tabora technical submission, got put to sleep, rear naked choke, and then just squeaked out a loss, and lost a split decision to Jareen Rosenstrike. So this may be Tai Tuivasa's last opportunity to be a UFC fighter, because I definitely would be surprised if he gets another fight after this, especially if Talison Teixeira knocks him out. But in his 22 matches, he's had 14 wins and 8 losses. In the 14 wins, 13 of the 14 have been by knockout, and then no wins by submission, and then just one his most recent. Yeah, no, not his most recent, but yeah, he's had one win by decision. And then in his 8 losses, he's been knocked out 3 times, submitted 3 times, and lost by decision twice. So probably not going to beat you by decision, and there's probably just as good a chance that he's not going to go the distance with you in a win. Like he's either going to get the knockout or he's not going to win. Is basically what Taya Tuivasa's career has basically been, like knockout or nothing. And he's fighting a young, was kind of young, and I would say still is an up and comer for Talison Teixeira, and there's a lot of potential behind him just because of his relative Glover Teixeira being such a great fighter. But he had a little bit of a setback in his last 5 fights until his last fight. He was undefeated. He was 8-0 in the UFC, and then he had a match with Derek Lewis. So obviously he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. But then he fought Derek Lewis, where you would have thought that he would have had a better chance fighting Derek Lewis, maybe trying to get like the takedowns, with him and trying to obviously keep his distance because he's 6'8", and I mentioned he's a young, even though he's Glover Teixeira, I want to say he's his brother. He's quite a bit younger. He's only 26 to I think Glover Teixeira is like 40 something. But yeah, you would have thought he'd have been able to use his distance, and if it came down to it, you would have thought he'd have been able to take Derek Lewis down, but he just got into an early brawl with Derek Lewis and didn't last but 35 seconds. He got knocked out at TKO punches in 35 seconds against Derek Lewis. I think it was because he jumped on a potential. He thought Derek Lewis was hurt at a early point in the match and just completely his game plan just got like thrown out the window and he got knocked out, similar to what we were talking about. Maybe Derek Lewis doing this past weekend was, as long as they don't get like into a brawl with him and don't end up like literally like running into one of his punches, then Derek Lewis doesn't have much of a chance anymore, being 40 years old and not in the greatest of shape. But maybe Taliesin Teixeira can avoid that happening to him in this fight. But in his nine fights, he's had 8 wins and 1 loss, which we just went over. And in the 8 wins, he's had 7 wins by knockout and 1 win by submission, and then hasn't never gone to decision in his career. So if it's gonna his fight ends in stoppages, like pretty much no matter what, and it's kind of surprising. Maybe it's just because he's so big that he just relies on the knockout ability so much. But you would think being a Teixeira, you'd think being a Teixeira that he would have a better ground game, maybe more submissions. But I mean, in total, he's only had 9 fights in his entire career. But anyway, so I think we kind of went into Taliesin Teixeira, kind of what he does. Basically, this is like his fight against Derek Lewis. Like, just as long as you don't get into a brawl with Tai Tuivasa and don't literally just like run into one of his big bombs, then there's no reason Taliesin Teixeira should not win this fight. And honestly, I would kind of like to see him take Tai Tuivasa down and just beat him up with ground and pound or get a submission. But I think this probably ends up being similar to his past fights, but not like his most recent one. I think he's going to end up knocking Tai Tuivasa out. So hopefully, for Paramount's sake, we'll get 2 knockouts back to back to start the card. So in the heavyweight bout between Tai Tuivasa versus Taliesin Teixeira, I got Taliesin Teixeira basically just ending Tai Tuivasa's career here. And probably after this fight, probably should not just be his UFC career, but probably mixed martial arts career. Might need some family members talking to him, because I got Taliesin Teixeira knocking Tai Tuivasa out in this fight, and I could see it in the first, second round. Tai Tuivasa is even though he was able to get to split decision against Jairzinho Rozenstruik in his last fight, I still think that obviously he has no like ground game or submission defense, but his chin is very suspect. It could be very sus and made out of glass. All right, so now then let's move on here to the third fight on the card. We have a lightweight bout between Rafael Fiziev versus Mauricio Ruffi. And so I'll admit I was kind of disrespectful. The disrespect. I didn't show the type of respect or put the name the respect on his name in Rafael Fiziev, just because unlike a lot of people, I wasn't really moved by his two fights against Justin Gaethje. But then seeing what Justin Gaethje did to Paddy Pimblett last week makes me respect Rafael Fiziev being able to go 10 rounds with Justin Gaethje and never really look all that in danger in any of them, and not taking a whole lot of damage in any of them. So he's a tank. He really is. But hadn't had great numbers. I guess his record hasn't been real great over his last 5 fights. But he's also fighting some pretty good fighters. Fought Justin Gaethje twice and got knocked out by Mateus Gamrot, but he's just 2-3 in his last five fights. And his last fight was a decision victory over Ignacio Bahamondes. And in his career, he has 17 uh, matches with 13 wins and 4 losses. In the 13 wins, he has 8 wins by knockout, uh, 1 win by submission, and 4 wins by decision. In the 4 losses, he's been knocked out twice, uh, never been submitted, and then 2 losses by decision. But he's a kickboxer, likes to see it's like Muay Thai kickboxing, like real technical striking, like that. That's what you would think, like looking at his background. But then you watch his fights with Justin Gaethje, and they just all out wars at times in some of those fights. And he's facing Mauricio Ruffi, who's trying to get back on track after he lost via face crank to Benoit Saint Denis, who is on the co-main event of this card, I do believe. So a lot of connecting the dots for this card. But so Mauricio Ruffi, he was on a bit of a winning streak of himself there before he ran into Benoit Saint Denis, but he was on a 6-fight winning streak. Yeah, he was on a 6-fight winning streak. No, he was on a 7-fight winning streak, but he's 4-5-1 in his last 5 fights, and he's 0-1 in his last fight, where he got submission face cranked at the 2:56 mark of the second round. And in his 14 matches, he's had 12 wins, 2 losses. In the 12 wins, he's had 11 wins by knockout, 0 wins by submission, and 1 win by decision. And in the 2 losses, he's been knocked out once and submitted once. So this seems like kind of like a similar kind of matchup in regard to like Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. Obviously, I'm not putting Mauricio Ruffi's career, like comparing it to Justin Gaethje, but I'm just comparing it in regards to they're two like really tough guys that have won a lot and knocked out a lot of people and have showed for the most part that they have good chins, good chins. He's only been knocked out. Ruffy's only been knocked out once, and that was like years ago. Wasn't Yeah, that was like back in 2019, and we saw what Rafael Fiziev was able to endure in his 2 fights with Justin Gaethje. But in this lightweight bout between Rafael Fiziev versus Mauricio Ruffi, uh, Rafael Fiziev has just had kind of like fight night performances kind of attached to his name, so I could easily see this like stealing the night as just kind of like an all out brawl between these two in a stand up fight. But I just see Rafael Fiziev. Mauricio Ruffi really took a step up in competition when he fought Benoit Saint Denis, but Rafael Fiziev is no pushover in himself. So in this lightweight bout between Rafael Fiziev versus Mauricio Ruffi, I'm gonna go with Rafael Fiziev to kind of just edge Mauricio Ruffi out in a decision bout, decision victory for Fiziev. All right, now then, on to the co-main event. Co-main event, which also an impressive win by either one of these fighters could lead to a lightweight title eliminator. Easily could be next in line for a lightweight title shot. But this is so the co-main event is a lightweight bout between Dan Hooker versus Benoit Saint Denis. So Dan Hooker, I definitely say he's the hangman. He's a fan favorite just because of the crazy stuff he says, but I've never been able to really jive with Dan Hooker, really get behind him all that much. The main reason is I was just so confused when he had a fight like one year and he didn't have like any tattoos at all, and then like I don't know, it was it a year or maybe just like 6 months later he comes in and he's just like completely like covered in tattoos. It was just weird. It was like talk about a life change or a direction, like you're what the kind of stuff that you're interested in. Like I'm interested in full body tattoos now. I don't know. That was confusing to me. But like I said, Dan Henderson, he's a uh, definitely a fan favorite and a kickboxer, and a lot of UFC fighters that are strikers and like to get in stand-up wars usually end up being fan favorites. But in his last 5 fights, he is 3-2, and he was on a 3-fight winning streak there before he ran into Arman Sarukian, who was able to submit him arm triangle choke back November 22nd, 2025, at the 3:34 mark of the second round. But he was looking pretty good, pretty hot there for a minute until he got caught in that submission. But he's had 37 matches with 24 wins and 13 losses. In the 24 wins, he has 11 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission, 6 wins by decision. So, I mean, he can beat you anyway. He can knock you out, submit you, or go the distance. And then in the 3 losses, he's had 3 losses by knockout, 4 losses by submission, and 6 losses by decision. So just the same, he can lose to you in any possible way as well. And he's fighting Benoit Saint Denis, who I feel is a little. Oh yeah, Benoit Saint Denis. He seems to have like more momentum behind him, and I guess that's probably because of his three fights that he's had. His 3 most recent fights have all been by wins by stoppages. He had a Kyle Prepolic submission arm triangle choke, Mauricio Rufy. Just like I said, there's a lot of connecting the dots on this card. Mauricio Rufy face crank, and then it was an awesome, pretty kind of a funny knockout that he had at UFC 322 over Benel Dariush, where like Benel Dariush like literally like ran into like an uppercut and then just like face planted like straight onto like the top of his head. But yeah, going off of that's 3-fight winning streak with all stoppages coming within the second round. Pretty impressive by Benoit Saint Denis, uh, who before that had lost, was on a 2-fight losing streak. So impressive to come back from that. And they were knockouts, kind of similar to Alexander Volkov. He'd lost 2 fights to some good fighters by knockout and TKO. So Dustin Poirier KO'd him at the 2:32 mark of the second round back in 2024, March 9th, 2024, and then Renato Moicano TKO doctor stoppage. So a little bit different. It was at the end of the second round. He was too beat up. His eyes were completely like swollen shut. But that was September 28th, 2024. But since then he's been on a heater and he's got a lot of momentum behind him. So he's 3-2 in the last 5, but 3-0 in the last 3. In his 20 matches, 20 fights, he's had 16 wins, 3 losses. In the 16 wins, he's had 5 wins by knockouts, 11 wins by submission, 0 wins by decision. And then in the 3 losses, he's been knocked out twice, never been submitted. So you see with how many submission wins he's got, and then how many submission losses he has. He's got a good submission game and good submission defense. And then had 1 loss by decision, and then 1 no contest. So I'm thinking I'm gonna lean in and kind of jump onto the Benoit Saint Denis bandwagon a little bit and lean into the fact that Dan Hooker lost his last fight by submission. Yeah, by submission, arm triangle choke, and that shows, at least from recent history and the record has shown that Benoit Saint Denis has a good submission game, either either defense or offense. So in the co-main event, lightweight bout between Dan Hooker versus Benoit Saint Denis, I'm going with Benoit Saint Denis to win this. I think he's going to submit Dan Hooker. I think he's going to get submitted again. I don't really know what way that might be. I like to go with it, being a choke, but I mean uh, his last couple wins. Well, I guess his last couple wins. I think he lost to a Kimura. I think Dan Hooker did, but those two last wins by Benoit Saint Denis. No, it was a arm triangle stroke by Sarukian. So that seems like that's probably pretty fitting, fitting way for Benoit Saint Denis, or a good way, a good path to victory for him to get a win, because those last two submission victories that he had, was an arm triangle choke over Kyle Polak, and then submission face crank over Mauricio Ruffi, which I guess that's a little bit different than like a asphyxiation type of choke. That's more just like crushing someone's face and smashing their nose and all that business, but still a choke. So in this lightweight co-main event bout between Dan Hooker versus Benoit Saint Denis, I'm going with Benoit Saint Denis to win this by submission. I think he's gonna get Dan Hooker. He's gonna get him in another choke of sorts. All right, so now then, on to the main event of UFC 325. We have a featherweight championship bout between Alexander Volkanovski, the champion, versus Diego Lopes, the challenger. And so these guys have already fought uh, pretty recently. So obviously, it's the sequel between these two. Uh, but I guess a little surprised that Diego Lopes got the rematch so soon. So they fought already, and obviously Alexander Volkanovski beat him by decision, and that was just April 12th, 2025. And then we'll get to Diego Lopes, but he's only had one fight and one win since then. And Alexander Volkanovski hasn't really fought anyone, hasn't fought anyone, hasn't defended the belt since then. So it makes me kind of question, like, what was the talent and the depth of the featherweight? Is it's struggling, or the health, I guess, as well. There may not have been healthy top contenders that were willing to fight Alexander Volkanovski, or more, not willing necessarily, but able. But yeah, so I'm a little surprised that this rematch is happening already, but I can't say that I'm disappointed, because the first fight was good. It took a little while to kind of get going. It seemed like, for Diego Lopes, because it was mostly a stand-up striking fight, and it seemed like Diego Lopes was kind of a little reluctant, kind of really kind of gun. I don't know. I wouldn't say gun shy, but kind of tentative. Uh, a little bit early on in the fight, and even got rocked a couple times, but he kind of, I guess, he loosened up, and his coaches in the corners, after telling him, like, he lost like the first three rounds, he kind of started kind of letting it go a little bit, and was able to rock Alexander Volkanovski, dropped him a couple times, and looked like he kind of had him on the ropes at the end of a couple of those later rounds. But Alexander Volkanovski had kind of already secured the win, already secured the bag, winning the earlier round. So that is what makes this fight interesting. I guess, I suppose you could say, because maybe Diego Lopes comes out 100 miles per hour to start this fight, instead of picking it up in the fourth and in the fifth round. But Alexander Volkanovski, a great champion, a two-time featherweight champion, a challenger for the lightweight championship. Just a UFC all-timer, obviously, hands down Hall of Famer. But Alexander Volkanovski, so he's uh, 37, which isn't like ancient, but the thing is, it's old it's older for smaller weight classes, for 145 pounder. And the reason for that is they kind of the first thing to go for any fighter or just person in general, especially smaller guys, is their speed and their quickness. But it seems to have not been an issue, at least in his last fight against Diego Lopes. But Alexander Volkanovski, it's kind of wild saying this, but he's just been 2-3 in his last five fights with a decision loss against Islam Makhachev with his first attempt to get the lightweight championship, and then he was KO'd, uh, head kick and punches KO'd by Islam Makhachev in their second fight, in their sequel fight, and that was at lightweight as well, and that was at the 306 mark of the first round, and then ran into Ilia Topuria, lost his belt. Ilia Topuria took his belt at the 332 mark of the second round with a KO punch, just devastating. So really, I think really what we learned, if nothing else, in his first fight with Diego Lopes is that Alexander Volkanovski, he's still got a chin. His chin is not completely gone because we talked about how he maybe has slowed down just with his speed and agility as a smaller weight class, just being the 145er. But it seems like he went the distance with Diego Lopes, which became a bar fight, a street fight towards the end of that fight. And he took some pretty good shots and was able to go the distance still with him. So that's what that fight proved to me more than anything. But Alexander Volkanovski, in his 31 matches, he has 27 wins with 4 losses. In the 27 wins, he has 13 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and 11 wins by decision. In the 4 losses, he's had 3 losses by knockout, which 2 of them were pretty recent, and then 0 losses by submission. So he's got a good submission game and got a good defense, but that doesn't use it offensively all that much. And then one loss by decision. So it's for the most part, it's usually he's either going to knock you out, which doesn't come from usually just like a single punch. It's usually gets an opponent rattled, and then usually is quite a lot of those are finished with ground and pound. And then if it's not like that, it's probably going to decision. But so his opponent, challenger Diego Lopes, got to congratulate him for just staying on his grind, not taking any back seats to any other fighters or taking any type of days off. Like the second he knew he had another shot at the belt, he was sign. Where do I sign? Type of deal. But in his last 5 fights, he is 4-1 in his last 5 fights, and the one being against Alexander Volkanovski, and then he got an impressive win over Jan Silva, who we saw win last week. Who definitely seemed more at the time that Jan Silva was had quite a bit of momentum behind him. So that's why that win was so good. It helped Diego Lopes so much in regards to getting his title shot, his rematch, and also with it being in such devastating and exciting fashion because he beat Jan Silva with a spinning back elbow and punches at the 4:48 mark of the second round. But Alexander Volkanovski hasn't fought anyone since then, and that's all it took for Jan Silva, that's all it took for Diego Lopes to get right back in line for a title shot. But in his 30 matches, he's had 27 wins with 7 losses, 11 knockouts, 12 submission wins, and 4 wins by decision. In the 7 losses, he's been knocked out twice, never submitted, and has 5 losses by decision. So obviously, I think that's probably something that gets understated or kind of overlooked by him, is that he has such a great submission game, offensively and defensively. But in this fight, it was really hard to tell how this fight is going to go. If I knew that Diego Lopes was going to come out in this fight like he did in the fourth and the fifth round of their first fight, then I would think that yeah, Diego Lopes has a good chance of winning this fight. And maybe because he leaves himself vulnerable, he may end up getting knocked out because he comes out like I said, 100 miles per hour through the first 3 rounds. Like he kind of was a little tentative and got rocked a couple of times in the first 3 rounds in the first fight. But I almost just kind of want to say that I think this is just going to be, round round 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But it just kind of all depends on Diego Lopes's uh, game plan. If he decides to come out more motivated in the early rounds, or tries to go to the ground game as an option, because there wasn't a lot of that in the first the first 5 rounds of their fight. But anyway, so in this featherweight championship bout between Alexander Volkanovski, the champion, versus Diego Lopes, I think I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski to win this. And see, I got my tongue twisted. It's a hard decision. I'm almost tongue twisted, wanting to pick both of them. But I'm going with Alexander Volkanovski to just edge out another decision win here. As long as he doesn't get caught and doesn't get caught like early on, like he did in the later rounds of their first fight, then I don't see why Alexander Volkanovski probably can't control the pace of the fight. And if he wants to control where the fight goes and tries to take it down, I don't see why Alexander Volkanovski wouldn't be able to control that either. So in this featherweight bout between Alexander Volkanovski, the champion, versus Diego Lopes, the challenger, I'm going with Alexander Volkanovski to continue the decision victory over Diego Lopes with, like I said, round 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So anyway, so that's UFC 325. Volkanovski versus Lopes 2. And just kind of looking ahead just slightly in regards to if there's when the next fights will be. It's a fight night, but it is just the week after this Saturday on February 7th, 2026, and you got some decent names on there. Uh, but we'll talk more about that and maybe mention a little bit more of that at the end of the recap show, the reaction show for UFC 325. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So this evening. So can I get a check, please?